It was a quiet evening in the small town of Glenville, where the train station had stood for over a century. The tracks were still in use, though fewer passengers traveled these days. For most people, the station was just a relic of the past. But for Eleanor, a 36-year-old history teacher, the station held a mystery she couldn't explain. Eleanor had grown up in Glenville and had always been fascinated by the stories of the ghost train, an urban legend about a mysterious train that appeared only under certain conditions. According to the legend, the train wasn't ordinary. It was a portal to the past. One evening, after grading papers late into the night, Eleanor decided to take a walk to clear her mind. She wandered to the train station where the old clock tower struck midnight. The station was empty except for a cold breeze and the faint hum of electricity. Then she heard it, a distant whistle. At first, Eleanor thought it was her imagination, but the sound grew louder, accompanied by the rhythmic chugging of wheels on steel. Emerging from the mist was an old-fashioned steam locomotive, its black engine gleaming under the moonlight. The train's arrival was as surreal as it was impossible. This type of train hadn't been in use for decades. The train slowed to a stop, and a conductor stepped out. He was dressed in a crisp uniform from a bygone era. "Evening, miss," he said, tipping his hat. "Where are you headed?" Eleanor froze, unsure how to respond. Finally, she stammered, "Where does this train go?" The conductor smiled enigmatically. "Anywhere you need to be, but only where you've already been." Eleanor hesitated, but felt an inexplicable pull toward the train. She stepped aboard, the wooden floors creaking beneath her feet. Inside, the carriage was a blend of elegance and nostalgia, with velvet seats and brass fixtures. The train lurched forward, and as it gained speed, Eleanor noticed something strange. The landscape outside the window wasn't the present-day Glenville she knew. Instead, it seemed to rewind. Buildings disappeared, replaced by older structures, and the modern streets turned into dirt roads. The train stopped abruptly, and the conductor gestured for her to step off. She found herself in Glenville as it was in 1998, the year she was 10 years old. The streets were filled with familiar faces, neighbors, friends, and even herself as a child, riding her bicycle down the street. Eleanor realized the train had brought her back to a pivotal moment in her life. She saw her younger self biking toward the town square where a festival was being held. It was a day she remembered well, a day when she had argued with her best friend Claire and said words she regretted for years. Unable to resist, Eleanor followed her younger self to the festival. She saw Claire standing by the candy stand, her face lighting up when she spotted young Eleanor. But then the argument began, just as it had in Eleanor's memory. "You never listened to me," her younger self had shouted. "And you only care about yourself," Claire had retorted, tears in her eyes. Eleanor wanted to intervene but wasn't sure if she could. The conductor's words echoed in her mind. "Anywhere you need to be, but only where you've already been." Before she could act, the scene faded and she was back on the train. The train moved again, and the landscape outside changed. When it stopped, she was in 2010. Eleanor stepped off into her college campus. She recognized this as the day she had decided not to visit her grandmother in the hospital, choosing instead to study for an exam. Her grandmother had passed away that evening, and Eleanor had carried the guilt ever since. This time, Eleanor didn't hesitate. She ran to the hospital and found her younger self sitting in the library, surrounded by textbooks. "Go," she whispered to her past self, even though she knew she couldn't be seen or heard. The younger Eleanor hesitated, as if she had felt something, but ultimately she closed her books and left for the hospital. The train took her to more moments she had tried to forget, times when she had been too afraid to speak up, too distracted to appreciate someone, or too stubborn to admit she was wrong. With each stop, Eleanor saw the ripple effects of her choices. She began to understand that the train wasn't just about reliving the past, it was about learning from it. The train stopped one last time, and Eleanor found herself back in 2023. She stepped off at the Glenville station, but something felt different. The air was lighter, the night quieter. The conductor tipped his hat to her one last time. "Remember, miss," he said, "the past shapes us, but it doesn't define us. What matters is what you do next." The train disappeared into the mist, leaving Eleanor standing alone on the platform. The next morning, Eleanor woke up feeling different. Her heart felt lighter and her mind clearer. She decided to reach out to Claire, her childhood friend, whom she hadn't spoken to in years. Claire answered the phone, surprised but happy to hear from her. Eleanor also visited her grandmother's grave, bringing flowers and speaking words of love and gratitude she hadn't said before. Though she couldn't change the past, Eleanor realized she could honor it by living more fully in the present. The ghost train never appeared again, but its journey stayed with her. A reminder that while time moves forward, its lessons are always within reach.